Hey everyone, welcome back. Today I'm going to be reviewing some footage I captured last night of me playing 200 Zone on Bovada. This video is, I'm recording it the next day, so I'm just going to review my play and hopefully give you some tips and insight into how you can better beat these games. Now, before I jump in, I will just say that I don't really think that playing fast fold formats like this is the best idea. I actually have a full article on my blog called "You Should Probably Stop Playing Zoom." The reason I don't like these games in general is they tend to be pretty reg infested. The more regs you have at your table, I mean, it's great that you can pump volume because you can play just a ton of hands per hour in these games. But when you mostly play against regs, obviously your win rate's going to be reduced. And that really jacks up your variance. And when you increase your variance, you exponentially increase the bankroll requirements that you need in order to safely play at your limit. And basically, that can make it really hard to move up in stakes if you are even beating the games and beating the rake. So I generally don't advise most players to play fast fold formats. I think for some people it can work, but those are really just like the top regs in the game. And those people are going to probably be successful no matter what they do. They're just going to move up pretty quickly. So the reason that I'm playing this is just because it's really good for a play and explain format to get a lot of hands in. And of course, we would probably like me to be playing 500 zone rather than 200, but unfortunately, it just wasn't running at the time when I wanted to record this. So on the right table there, I'll call that table 2, and I'll call the left table table 1. That was just a 3-bet pot where I 3-bet ace king, and I'm going to use a half pot c-bet size, and I'll check that combo of ace king sometimes, and I'll bet it sometimes. It's just a mix. Now, I usually play 3-bet or fold from the cutoff. I don't flat call. The reason that I'm flat calling here is because I see multiple short stacks behind me. And because this is Bovada and it's fast fold, I can't tell who's a recreational and who's not, but I'm going to assume if a player is a short stack, it's likely to be a recreational, and I'm going to expand my ranges because of that. On the left-hand table, this is just button versus big blind, and I see bet the flop small. I checked back the turn, and he bet the river for half pot. I'm not sure how clear of a raise this is in theory. I didn't check, but I don't think it's really even a question when he bets half pot like that, because I think he's just really capped, which means that he's not protecting his range with enough nutted hands. So I think it's safe to raise there. Also on the turn there, you notice I checked back my 2-pair. Kind of a little GTO tip is that when you're double barreling and you have a weak 2-pair on a triple Broadway board, so with 3 cards 10 or higher, and you have 2-pair that does not contain top pair, that's almost always going to be a pure check. So I had queen 8 on king queen 10 8, and that 2-pair is almost always going to be a pure check in theory. King 10 suited is going to get 4-bet a lot. You're going to see that I'm kind of struggling with my pre-flop sizes because I never play these stakes. And I don't have like a software that just converts to big blinds installed. So my 3-bet sizes and my 4-bet sizes are probably going to be all over the place. I'm going to be mostly c-betting this flop for a small size. Turn, I'll either bet or check and just mix it. River brings the 4 straight, but I don't think it's super important because the 4 doesn't really interact with either of our ranges very much. This is not solver approved jamming here. But I just think that, so he happened to have ace 5 and he just somehow checked the turn, which is pretty insane. I wasn't expecting a snap call there, except maybe aces or maybe some ace four suited. But good for him. He definitely successfully trapped me there. The jam is not supposed to be a bluff in theory. I just think it's going to be a very hard defense for him to manage. Basically, when I jam there, he's really never supposed to fold an ace. And I think it's difficult for players to not overfold there. So that was just an exploitative jam. This is an anonymous fast fold environment. And so I'm not worried at all about people exploiting me if I get out of line. And just going to fold the turn here. On table one, on this board, in theory, you probably want to use a larger size, but I think c-betting range for a small size is also good. Using the larger size on these double Broadway boards becomes more important when you are in later positions. When you're in earlier positions, you don't like overbet as much. And just giving up on the left. You can see I have my random number generator in the top right, so that's just helping me make decisions when I'm going to be mixing my frequencies. On table two, I believe this is a 3-bet pot, and it went check on the flop. I think I'm blocking a ton of bluffs there. I think he'll probably be under bluffing, and I'm also kind of suspicious that he seems to be sizing up on the turn, so I just dipped out of there. I might be supposed to, I don't think I'm even supposed to defend that in theory. I could be wrong, but I think in practice it's a pretty easy fold. Getting snap called in the 4-bet pot when I exploitatively bluff jam is never fun. I think it's kind of funny that that happened on this recording because as I mentioned in my previous video, I've been on a bit of a downswing recently, and it just feels like that is what's happening. Like I just can't win in 3-bet pots and 4-bet pots. I just keep running into the nuts. But that's okay. I mean, it's important to remember. I'd like to remind myself of something I read once by this author, Morgan Housel. He was talking about finance, but we'll just paraphrase. He says that you should look at your downswings as a fee instead of a fine. So if you're looking at it as a fee, that kind of means like you feel like you did something wrong when you went on a downswing, you're getting punished. If you look at it as a fine, it's more like, well, this is just the cost of doing business. And I think that's the better way of looking at it, because if you never went on a downswing, well, then there would be no reason for weaker players to ever play against you. You have to lose sometimes. Otherwise, people just wouldn't play this game against you for fun or for money. So that mental framework does help me a lot. And I think in general, people underestimate how important 3-bet pots are for how you're running at any given time. 3-bet pots and 4-bet pots, but it's mostly 3-bet pots because 4-bet pots are so rare. On table one, I'm just folding there because I've got a weak pair and I'm blocking a ton of bluffs, so I think I'm supposed to fold there. But yeah, three bet pots. You know, when you're in a downswing, it's most likely that you're getting crushed in three bet pots and card distribution. And I think in general, people don't appreciate enough how important three bet pots are in the grand scheme of things. I think people tend to over focus on single raise pots, and single raise pots just get far too much attention. I think three bet pots are more important, not just for variance, but also just like you should be studying them more, because it's a lot easier to make big mistakes in three bet pots. The strategies are a lot more pure when you have very tight ranges. Be careful not to overfold when people do this little min steal from the small blind versus the big blind. You definitely can never fold anything suited, and you have to go really, really deep into your offsuit kind of trash hands in order to not overfold. Even versus 3x, you can barely fold anything suited. I think at this rake structure, you can start to fold your weakest suited hands. I decided on table one to bluff here just because I couldn't really find very many bluffs in my range, and I felt like probably I'd be facing an overfold too, so it's pretty safe. And yeah, I think I just have to turn some pairs into bluffs there, because I don't really want to be bluffing with missed flush draws. And so what else am I really going to be bluffing with? On table two, it was bet, and then check again. And I just decided to check back. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to be value betting that combo at some frequency, but in practice, I think it's pretty safe to check it there. I'm not sure if I'm going to be getting called very often by weaker hands. Okay, on table one, not a great board for me, the ace wheel, but with the flush draw, I'm going to be mostly betting. And now I'm going to just pure check, and I'll check call, obviously. This short stack limper on table two is likely to be a recreational. I'm going to play pretty aggressively against these guys. Table one is going to mostly be a fold. I probably should have just 4-bet this just for the stream, but in theory, you're going to mostly fold jacks here. Start 4-betting queens. You'll probably see me playing pre-flop ranges that are too loose for this rake structure, but I don't really care. I think I have an edge in these games, and I haven't really studied 200 NL pre-flop ranges at all. I'm kind of just used to playing high stakes ranges. And like, it doesn't really matter that much, especially when you have a post-flop edge, because a lot of the hands that are on the borderline are just really close to indifferent. So it's not like really a mistake if you open a hand that's just outside of your opening range at a certain rake structure. Table one, I 3-bet in middle position versus under the gun. And the plan here was just to c-bet small and then try to check it down. And he rivered us, unfortunately. Another reason why I'll be expanding my preflop ranges, as I touched on before, is that when I see players that I think are likely to be recreationals behind me, I'm going to expand preflop even more, and you'll see me do that. Okay, getting 3-bet on table 1, I'm going to call. And on table 2, small blind versus under the gun, I'm going to mostly just bet half pot here. You can range bet half pot here. It's not really very exploitable. We face a large size on table 1. And you get a very good turn card for us. I'm not sure how often I'm supposed to bet this combo here, but I'm just assuming I'm supposed to bet a lot on the turn for a small size. So I'm going to just mix, sometimes bet, sometimes check. And easy fold on table 2 in the 3-bet pot. So like here, for example, I have ace-6, so this is still an open from the button, but even if I had a much weaker hand like king-6 offsuit, I think I might still raise it, because if you look at these two players in the blinds, they're looking like probably they're going to be pretty weak players. I flop a weak pair. I'm just going to check back here, although normally I would just kind of be c-betting this board a lot. And on table 1, I think I bet this hand almost all the time, but I did roll really passive, so I just decided to check this back. And then on table 2, basically a check down, and I decided to go for a really thin value bet. I'm not really sure if that's great, but he was a recreational player, so I'm going to value bet a bit looser against them. Their range will be weaker. Okay, squeezing on table 1. We get a quick call, and then another quick call. And I'm just going to lead small here. Or c-bet small, I mean. And now this guy raises. There's no way I'm shoving here, because with aces, I don't need any protection. I'm not worried about any run, except for that one. Like, that's not what I needed. But I think when I see this raise, it's most likely a recreational player. They tend to kind of spaz in spots like these, and it doesn't really make any sense for a reg to be doing this. Because he checked back the turn so quickly and didn't even think about bluffing, I decided to shove the river there. I thought maybe if he's not even thinking about bluffing, he is either scared off, or he has like a marginal hand, like a jack. So I just thought it might be a little bit better to jam myself instead of check to him again and hope he blows up again. But I'm not really sure what's better there. On table 2, that was just a multi-way pot. The flop checked around, and I decided to bet my flush draw. Pretty standard. I actually missed the action here. I think this might have been a limp and an ISO, but I'm not sure. But looks like a pretty easy check down. And on table 2, we have a multi-way limped pot, which is likely to be a recreational on the button. Playing a bit loose here with this hand. I'm ISOing a hand that's kind of not even supposed to be in my opening range. It's just outside of it, but I think it's fine. I flopped a weak pair. I'm just going to check back. Kind of a gross run out, but again, they river the jack. 3-bet pots are not being kind to me. Or I guess that was an ISO, but same thing. I'm going to raise my set on table 2. The turn brings a ton of draws, and so I think I just want to always overbet here on the turn. Go very polarized with a big sizing. And river, I would be surprised if I'm supposed to do anything but jam here, but could be wrong. Could be fun to check and try to induce a bluff from all of those missed draws on that board, but I actually think people will struggle to overbluff even on that board. People generally don't like to shove with missed draws in those spots as much as they're supposed to in theory. So again, this hand at this break structure, probably a fold, but who cares? And we have a short stack on the big blind. Flopped a pretty good pair versus a couple of weak players, so I'm just going to stab. And I think we can just check fold the jack-9. So you can see just how many short stacks there are. I think the pool was 40 players or more, and it's looking really soft. I'm getting really out of line here with my opening ranges with 10-9. Definitely a recreational player on table 1 with the emojis. So I do play a totally different strategy versus recreationals than versus regulars. And in a format like this where I don't know for sure if a player is a recreational, if he's just a short stack, that's like an indicator, but it's not proof, because there are regs who short stack or just who lost some money the hand before and haven't rebought yet. But I'll just kind of play like a hybrid strategy. On the turn on table 1, I check back the flop on a board where I'm supposed to check a lot more. And turning the flush draw, I'm going to mostly bet the turn. And then I got raised, so just folding there. On table 2, we face a small c-bet on the flop and then 150% pot overbet on the turn. I have top pair plus the wheel draw, so I'm going to continue. And I'd probably, if he bluffed there, I would probably call again, because I think I have a pretty sick bluff catcher, removing the ace and then blocking the 4-5 suited wheel. So I think definitely, depending on what size he bets, we definitely want to at least call with that hand sometimes. So on table 1, I 3-bet versus under the gun, and I'm going to be checking the monotone flop quite often. I'm going to be checking this combo most of the time, and then even though it's kind of a small c-bet, I think it's still a pure fold here. So you don't usually check ace-king in a 3-bet pot and then fold to a small stab, but on a monotone board, you can start to, and especially when the starting ranges are tight because it's big blind versus under the gun, then it becomes even more appropriate to fold ace-king in stronger absolute value hands. Okay, I face a small 3-bet from the short stack. I'm going to stab this hand small sometimes and check sometimes. And I'm not really even thinking about calling here. It's a big raise. It felt pretty premeditated. I think when he snap jams like that, he either has like an overpair or a pretty strong draw most of the time. And I have a short stack flatting in the small blind. I'm just kind of playing my hand here. I'm not trying to balance my ranges or anything if I think I'm most likely going to be up against a recreational. Squeezing on table 1. He does on table 2 bet half pot on the river. I do have a strong ace high. I mean, it's kind of, the board looks a bit congested. It looks a little bit hard for him to find bluffs, but I only need him to show a bluff 25% of the time to break even there. And I think that's going to be okay to bluff catch there. On table 1, I'm going to c-bet this hand sometimes and check it sometimes. We turn an ace, so we're going to mostly check here, but if we want to get super fancy, we can like a lead 20%, I think. I think the solver likes to do that on the ace turn. And on table 2, this is a single raise pot where I'll mostly be checking, but I decided to c-bet here. And then I decided to lead really small. I probably should have led even smaller, actually, like 10% pot, but you can either check or block bet here, I think. And I've been liking the block bet recently. I've been kind of studying it more, and I think it can be better than checking sometimes because you're just putting your opponent in a spot where he hasn't studied. Like the response versus the tiny bet is quite a bit different than if you just checked, and a lot of people haven't studied it, so they can make pretty big mistakes if they fail to raise or if they fold hands they're not supposed to. And then he did raise, and he raised quite large, which was a bit alarming, but it seemed like a pretty good hand to bluff catch, and so I just decided to bluff catch there. I don't think that that's going to be really under bluffed or anything. I think regs do tend to find enough bluff raises and often miss value raises as well. On the flop here, small blind versus big blind, you can c-bet or check with his hand. I decided to c-bet, and I'm just using the small c-bet size in this spot. I turned the king and I bet again, and river was pretty blank run out, so just decided to triple. And I'm not going to be betting too much on table one, but I think I rolled really aggressive. Sorry, when I say roll, if you're not familiar with that term, it just means I'm using my random number generator. So it's telling me to, if I roll a really low number, that means I'm going to take the more aggressive action of my options. On this board, I'm going to c-bet my whole range for a small size. Turn is pretty disconnected, so I'm only going to use an overbet size just to simplify. Solver likes to use 120% pot on boards like these, and we'll also mix 2/3, but I don't want to use multiple sizes, so I'll just use the overbet. And I'm going to just pretty much continue betting with that hand all the time. And on table two, we're blind versus blind. We face the 4-bet. I'm going to continue with this hand. And could be interesting to consider just jamming the flop here, because we do have a pretty strong drawing hand, and I think we could get it in versus like weaker nut flush draws, but I just decided to call. I think I used my random number generator there. Another 4-bet pot on table one, and this hand is going to kind of play itself. Just a really good board for us, so we can just kind of triple barrel with small sizes on most runouts. And then, so river again here. I'm not sure how much ace queen is going to bluff, but when the board runs out like this, it's going to be difficult for me to find enough bluffs. And so I'm going to err on the side of bluffing too much. Because if you think about it, I mean, how many hands do I even have there that are not a missed flush draw that don't have a pair? There's not very many. It's like ace queen and ace jack pretty much. So we definitely don't want to be missing bluffs in that spot. Okay. Flop went check, check. Middle pair on the turn is almost always going to be a check. And river, we can either, I think, bet or check the river. I decided to bet. Can go for the check raise too. Flatting here with a short stack behind me on table one. He didn't come along for the ride. Mostly checking the flop with my weak ace. Turn, I can either bet or check. I rolled pretty aggressive, so decided to bet. And now just an easy check on the river. Check calling the flop from the big blind versus the middle position. And I think I'm going to overbet this river. feel like I'm getting aces a lot. So here we have an open-ended straight draw, low board. I'm gonna probe a lot, and it's kind of in style now to use either the block bet or the over bet when you're probing in these spots, because solver likes to do that. But you can just use 2/3, simplify to that single size, and you will not really lose any EV, which is why I like to do that, because it's easier to keep my range balanced. And then on the river, I just decided to give up with a hand which I think is probably a bit too strong to bluff there. And I think we're nearing the end here. Got maybe a couple of minutes left. But I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope if you like it, let me know in the comments, and maybe I can do more of these. Flopping top two versus the short stack. And like I said before, I'm not really trying to play balanced versus a probable recreational player. I'm just going to fast play this hand. Try to get a lot of money in the pot. You want to be careful about overfolding to these min opens, like on table 2, because you have to call a lot of suited stuff. You have to call, maybe not at this rake structure, but at higher stakes rake structures, you have to call like offsuit connected hands and all of your ace-x, things like that. And definitely if I think I have a weaker player in the hand, I'm going to expand even more. So definitely want to play 5 deuce suited in that spot. It's funny, people do still tend to really overfold preflop in a lot of spots, and that's one of them. And you would think, with all the solvers and all the technology these days, that people would have preflop down, but they don't. Even up to high stakes, people have struggled to meet their defense requirements for stuff like min steals, things that are kind of counterintuitive where you need to defend a lot. Because I think people get a little bit sleepy sometimes, and they just kind of play as if they're facing a 2.5x open or something, but they're not. Again, on table 2, I'm just going to see bet range for small. Probably, in theory, a larger sizing is better, but not that much better. And on table 1, this hand will be a pure check, I believe. You almost never want to bet a weak, like a really weak pocket pair on the turn when you're probing. I'm using the smaller 3-bet size. You can 3-bet larger too, but I find it's easier to play with the smaller 3-bet. And that's it. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you learned something, and thank you for watching. Good luck at the tables.